I'd like to call this meeting of the City of Clayton Board of Zoning Appeals to order, 7th of February at 7 p.m. First, I guess we have a roll call.
Ms. Weeks? Mr. McGinnis?
Here.
Ms. Hunter?
Here.
Mr. Madewell?
Here.
Ms. Caldwell? Here.
I'd like to make a motion that Ms. Weeks be noted as excused. She had a prior family commitment for tonight.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Meeting procedures. We have one case in front of us tonight. It's a variance case. And what we'll do is we'll call the meeting to order, which I've already done. Then we'll go through and administer the oath of, to anybody for the public and from staff that wishes to speak on this agenda item. The reason we do that is because all the testimony given before this board is sworn testimony. The recourse for any decision that we make is to go to the Common Pleas Court. And what they do is they review everything. Everybody has to be sworn in. So if you're going to be talking, you think you're going to be talking, or maybe just stand up and say, hey, you, we'd like you to stand up and take that oath. So, having said that, if you could stand and please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give to this board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say, I do. Thank you. I'll call the agenda item and ask staff to go ahead and present the case tonight. We'll ask the applicant if they have anything to add to what staff has presented to us. At that time, the board is going to be allowed to ask any questions to staff or the applicant. We'll be opening the floor to public comments at that time. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to make their comments. We ask that you don't repeat. If somebody's already said something, there's no need to repeat it again. We get it, and we'll make sure that it's duly noted. Direct your comments to the Board of Zoning Appeals, not to the applicant or not to staff, and the applicant will have a chance to respond to comments at the end of the public input. Once the floor has been closed to public comment, no additional comments can be made. We'll ask if any comments were provided prior to the meeting to Mr. Dorman, and then we'll close the floor to public comments at that time and ask if the applicant has any chance to rebut or add information to what's been presented tonight, and see if there's any more comments from the board. And at that point, what we'll do is we'll go through a findings of fact for the case. Everything that we do is according to a script, okay? And what we have in front of us tonight is a variance. A variance has very specific things that we need to address during our hearing tonight. So we'll go through and we'll talk about the findings of fact for the case. And then we'll ask for a motion and a second to either approve or disapprove the application. And then we'll have a roll call for the vote. So that's our process. That's the way it works. Again, it's pretty scripted. Okay, we're not here to change zoning. We're not here to make any changes to what already happened, or has happened, or will happen when it comes to zoning regulations. When it comes to a particular property that's zoned a certain way, what we do is we look at three things. We either look for a conditional use. That's a conditional use that's permitted in a particular zoned area. However, it needs to go through us so that we can go through the qualifications, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the case tonight. We're also here to hear an administrative appeal. That's if somebody has a problem, they go to Seth, they don't like what Seth wrote up on them for one reason or another, they want to appeal it, it comes to us. Again, we don't change zoning. We don't change the code, but what we're here is to rule on those particular cases. And the third thing we look at is a variance, and that's the instrument that's in front of us tonight. And we'll go through that in detail. You'll see that as we unroll. So, based on all that, I guess the case in front of us tonight, no, it's not. We need to, first of all, look at the minutes of the previous meeting. So let's go ahead and do that. The minutes of January 3rd, 2003 Board of Zoning Appeals meetings. Do I hear any additions, corrections, clarifications, or addendums that we wish to make to those minutes? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. So the minutes of January 3rd, 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals have been approved. Don't have any old business. New business tonight is a case in front of us. It's a variance, VAR23-01 at 6892 Salem Avenue. It's a request for a variance to allow a truck terminal dock bay less than 100 feet from a district that allows residential uses. The request was made by Bruns General Contracting, who's the applicant, on behalf of Roadstar Trucking. At this, turn it over to you, Seth.
Thank you, Vice Chair McGinnis. Good evening, board members. See if this works, okay. To introduce the application, we have a variance application that was submitted again by the applicant, Bruns General Contracting, on January 17th, 2023 for Denoa Group, Inc. It's the property owner. And they're proposing Roadstar Trucking to be constructed at that location. Subject of request is approval of a variance to allow the easternmost dock bay proposed for the Roadstar Trucking Terminal building to be less than 100 feet from a zoning district that allows residential uses. Property is located at 6892 Salem Avenue on the south side of Salem Avenue between Union Road to the east and Old Salem Road to the west. The parcel ID number is M60-03207-0015. The area of the property is 6.12 acres. The zoning on the property is CMI, Commercial, Manufacturing, and Industry District. A public notice was printed in the Brookville Star on January 25th, 2023. And letters were mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the applicant's property on January 24th, 2023. This aerial map shows the surrounding area. The subject property is highlighted, zoned CMI. To the west is 51 acres, also zoned for manufacturing and industry. And then as you go down Salem Avenue to the east, you get a number of properties that are zoned RSD for residential single unit district. And then as you get close to the intersection with Union Road, there are some properties on that side of Salem zoned CMX for commercial mixed use. Kind of see the variety of zonings within the immediate area, both on the south and north side of Salem. It's a little closer zoom in, again highlighted parcel. It's a 2019 aerial image showing the house and the garage that were on that site before it was sold. The property was rezoned by the previous owners, William and Mary Lauer, in 2021 from residential to industrial. The rezoning became effective on May 1st, 2021 after City Council approved the rezoning. Roadstar Trucking purchased the property on November 12th, 2021, but the city first met with them to discuss the possibility of a truck terminal in the summer of that year. Plan review in a straight zoning district such as the CMI is performed by city staff. It was during the first round of review that I found the issue that is the subject of the variance request tonight. As proposed, the easternmost dock bay of the truck terminal would be 88 feet from the adjacent residential property to the east instead of the minimum 100 feet per section 112106 B1IG of the Planning and Zoning Code. Therefore, a variance is required. A little bit on the site plan that's before staff and that you have in your packets tonight. Access to the site will be from Salem Avenue, including a small median break to allow traffic to enter and exit from either direction on Salem Avenue. The employee parking and terminal building which is 13,000 square feet. Will be toward the front of the site with docks. There'll be 4 bays behind the building and trailer parking for 80 spaces for trailers toward the rear of the property. There will be a truck wash bay that would be entered from the front of the building and exiting to the rear of the terminal building. And that's going to be on the westernmost side of the terminal building. There is proposed a detention basin at the rear of the property for stormwater collection and slow release. Because the property is adjacent to residentially zoned property both to the east and south, a 30-foot wide buffer zone is required with a combination of evergreen landscaping and fencing to help screen the view of the business and in part to help minimize the noise generated by the business. This is the landscape plan that was in the construction plans that staff has reviewed, at least initially. Along the east property line, there will be a 6-foot tall chain link fence behind which will be planted a combination of blue spruce trees and Burke juniper shrubs from the Salem Avenue right-of-way south to the rear property line. Just to give you an idea, this is kind of the right-of-way along Salem. And the landscape will go for the entire eastern property line. And then to the rear, and this is adjacent to a few properties in the Bayberry Trail subdivision, there will be a 6 to 8 foot tall privacy fence with a row of Burke juniper shrubs planted behind the fence. Privacy fence on this property line is in lieu of evergreen trees because of the proximity of the detention basin to the rear property line. I've attempted to overlay the plan onto the aerial image from 2019 to give you kind of a sense of where the existing buildings were in relationship to the proposed building, in relationship to the eastern neighbor or adjacent property owners' structures as well, their house and their garage. And indicating that the easternmost dock is proposed to be 88 feet from that property line that they'll share with the neighbor to the east. A few of the site photos. Some work has begun on the site. We've talked to the contractor about not doing any more work until we get our plans approved, which they haven't been, and until a permit's been issued, which it hasn't been. But after review and thorough consideration of the variance application, staff would recommend that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the variance request as submitted. I'll leave up the plan overlay for the discussion. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Any questions from the board? I've got one question, I guess, Seth. We're here because the terminal building encroaching into the side lot, if you will, or you know, within 12 feet or by 12 feet. Mm-hmm. Since if we're looking at this plot map, the way you have it set up right now, mm-hmm. the top of the map, if you will, or you know, further up Salem Avenue, mm-hmm. is zoned industrial.
That's right.
Would it make sense simply to have the front buildings kind of flip-flopped and have that building to that side and have the egress on the property line, you know, the southern edge? Would that cause any problems with zoning?
I don't think it would. I mean, obviously there's building setbacks that are required in the industrial district. The applicant originally had a conceptual plan that showed access on the easternmost side. We, as a city, had made a determination that the preference would be to have access on the other side because of the requested median break and spacing between, you know, I think there might be some existing median breaks a little closer as you go south on Salem Avenue. So, and that was a discussion that occurred before plans were submitted. The applicant was kind of doing their due diligence, so.
Okay, when the applicant gets up there, I'll talk a little more or ask questions. I got specific questions about what's going to be going on in that building. You know, I understand the truck traffic, but that's going to be incidental if,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to have tow motors and all that stuff going on. If the tow motors and that type of activity is going to be within that building, it may cause, you know, more of a disturbance if it's closer to the residents, is what I was thinking. Whereas if we were to push it further west, I guess it is, then, you know, then it would be more in line and in tune with the other planned activities on that particular parcel that hasn't been sold yet.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Along the same lines, and forgive me if I'm missing something, but was it a consideration just to move the building 12 feet to the west?
I think the reason that, the reason that the applicant will tell you, and it's a valid point, is that you need a certain width to bring trucks into the site and maneuvering them around. So I think where the building sits accomplishes that goal in terms of allowing trucks to move around and to make the movements and the turns that need to occur there.
So the discussions about this project started back in the summer of 2021, and is it fair to assume that all variety of, you know, layout for this strangely narrow lot were considered, and this is the best that you and the applicant came up with together as a team?
Yeah, I think we talked to the applicant about the zoning requirements, shared those with them, and they came to us with the plan that for the most part meets the zoning requirements, with the obvious exception of the variance before us tonight, so.
Any other questions from the board for staff? Thank you, Mr. Dorman.
Thank you.
Is there someone here to speak for or is the applicant? And if so, could you please come to the podium, state your name, your address, and address the board, please? Thank you. And again, if you could state your name and your address.
Yep. Eric Bruckman, E.L. Robinson Engineering, 3966 Eaglestone Drive, Dayton, Ohio, 45440. I am the engineer for the applicant. So,
Great. Do you have anything to add to what Mr. Dorman said?
no, Bruns and E.L. Robinson have had quite a few conversations with the city, just emphasizing what Seth said over the last year or so during the planning process, just trying to sort out all the different intricacies to a, like you called it, a long and narrow lot for a industrial facility. So this was by far the best option we were able to come up with that met a majority of the city's requirements as well as the owner's needs and demands for the project. So, but space was very tight.
Okay, I appreciate that. And again, I'll go back to the reason why we're here. You know, we're only here because of a 12-foot variance that we're looking for. Do you see any issues, or can you explain to me and to the other board members here about the placement of the building?
So the docks oriented to the rear was an important part, again, for ingress and egress in and out of those docks, not facing them towards the residential on the east side or things of that nature, and also for getting in, backing into those bay doors and pulling out. There's not space to turn that building 90 degrees. The building the docks have to sit where they are, the front door has to sit where it sits. It cannot be rotated 90 degrees.
Okay.
As
Well,
far as-
without the rotating, would it be possible to simply move it?
Shift it. Our answer is no. We can't come any further to the east. Obviously, we got a landscape buffer. Going further to the west, we have space constraints as we get to that property line that prevent us from getting any closer. The owner has identified a 30-foot drive lane. That's about as bare minimum as we'd want to get for trucks passing, two-way trucks passing a facility like that on a lane. But yes, that is about as tight as we could get it.
Okay, and I hear what you're saying there, and that makes sense. Now, the access road that's coming into the property from Salem Avenue, you know, if that were to be moved down, would it be possible to move the building?
I'm sorry, ask that again.
The access road at the top? Instead of having it at the top, why don't we move it to the bottom of the property?
I will go back to what Seth commented on earlier.
But the cut-ins and safety and,
There's two things that were considered when it came to the access for this property. One is the median cuts on Salem Avenue and their spacing configuration for ingress and egress as mixed with the existing traffic that's out there. The other consideration that Seth brought to us was a potential future access to the lot to the west, and the city's desire to combine the two parcels into a mutual access and create one median cut, so to speak, on Salem Avenue, which at that time our median cut would be closed and you would only have one ingress and egress to both parcels at that time. So with that in alignment, keeping the access road on the west side is what was decided by the city and Roadstar.
that makes perfect economic and safety sense. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that clarification. Are you prepared, you're the engineer, and I assume you're the operators, the owner-operators. So, you know, maybe you don't know about the owner operations of what's gonna be going on within that building. And if that's true, then I won't bother you with that question.
Bruns, who's the general contractor, they are the builder for the site. They may be able to answer this a little bit better, but in general, we're expecting more of a warehousing scenario, plus or minus 20 trucks in and out a day for the first couple of years, increasing to 30, 35 over time. The initial staffing would be 5 people full-time, just to give you guys a sense of the amount of activity. 5 people full-time for the first year or two, potentially increasing to 10 to 15 over time. There's no set progression on that as far as the timeline. The main operations would be 8 to 5. There would be some truck deliveries overnight, but there would not be anything backing up to the bay or any loading and unloading outside of the city's hours.
Okay, thank you, that helps. Okay, any other questions from the board?
Yeah, just a quick one. Can you explain the relationship between yourself, Bruns, Roadstar Trucking, or is it Roadway Trucking? Roadstar Trucking and the group that owns the property?
So the group that owns the property is Roadstar Trucking itself. Roadstar Trucking hired Bruns General Contracting as a design-build contractor. Bruns hired E.L. Robinson as their engineer.
Thanks. And just, is anyone from Roadstar here, out of curiosity? Okay.
And if I could just clarify a little bit on the ownership, the Denoa Group is the entity, but Rob and Avi Denoa are the owners of Roadstar Trucking, and they own the property. Yeah. And Bob, back to your point, there is a letter from Avi Denoa in your packet indicating that the building will be used as a transfer point for freight, so it'll be a transfer from one truck to another.
Correct. I did read that. I just wanted to hear operationally what that really meant. So, okay, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Dorman. Any other questions from the board?
I just have one quick question. Since it is the eastern dock that's the subject of this request, do you know if there have been any discussions as far as possibly limiting the activity on that bay?
Not that I'm aware of.
You did mention that it's going to be transferring of material, if you will, and storage, almost a warehousing type of a facility. Do you see this expanding in the future?
Not that I'm aware of. Most of our conversations with Roadstar have pretty much indicated that for this area of their market, this is the facility that they're looking for.
Okay, okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Since you are the engineer, I'm going to ask another question that deals with engineering, although it doesn't have anything to do with the variance that we're talking about. For a size of a footprint that we have up there, it's going to be paved. And I noticed in the details that Mr. Dorman handed to us that you had a discussion about groundwater and where drainage is going to go, so forth and so on. Do you have any comments about that? And have you opened a dialogue with the residential plat behind, if you will, to the south of this property?
So that was one of the things Seth put into his comment letter, and that's one of the things that we're actively working towards for our resubmission.
Okay, so there is still some work in progress that's going on here.
Yes.
When are you going to be going to get this finalized? What's your due date?
Well, should the variance be approved tonight, the target goal for resubmission of the plans would be towards the end of the week. Should the variance not be approved, obviously Roadstar would have to go back to the drawing board and rethink what we have going on as well as the timeline.
Okay, okay.
I'm going to ask one quick, also, you always hear that one more quick question, right? And then we were talking about moving and readjusting, and this may be a crazy question, but I'm assuming the two blocks that, don't get too close to this thing, which would be to the west of the loading docks, that's the in and out of the truck washing bay?
Correct. The one further to the west is the truck wash.
Okay, the two.
It's a three with an in and out. And then the four to the south are the loading bays.
Okay, how difficult would it be to put that washing bay on the other side of the building, shift that building? See what I'm saying?
Flipping.
Yeah. I mean, you see what?
It's not a loading area per se, it would be a truck wash, so I don't think that would.
Sorry.
I understand.
Yeah, just from a zoning standpoint, I mean, the issue is loading area, and by definition, I don't think a truck wash would be considered a loading area, so.
It
I
wouldn't,
think
so it wouldn't.
If the maneuverability could be worked out, I think you could probably flip.
That's what I'm saying. It probably wouldn't cause any zoning issues if it was on that west side
I
or east
don't
side.
know, however, if that flip would really net you 12 feet or not. I don't, seems like it's probably,
You're still gonna have that theoretical opening within that 88, within that 100 feet.
yeah. It's a good question, though.
Thank you.
I think we're just trying to play Tetris with this boxes here. See if we can't, 12 feet doesn't sound like a whole lot until we're nattering over it, so.
I will say, you guys have a pretty hefty landscape buffer, which I don't want to understate that there is going to be a large amount of landscaping, blue spruces, evergreens, pretty substantial 30, 40 foot tall trees somewhere down the road that are going to be planted along that area. along with some fencing that would provide some privacy. So there is a buffer there, even though we don't meet that 100 feet.
I do appreciate that, and I guess the other question I would have deals with the construction of the building itself, the actual transfer station, if you will. I'll call it that. You know, we'll get into the operational aspects of it, but I'm going to assume that there's going to be tow motors and other sort of vehicles that's going to be in there moving freight from one truck to another, from one trailer to multiple ones, and doing distribution of that. And that's going to be something that's going to be going for a while. Is that building going to be constructed so that the noise of that activity is going to be echoing through a steel structure and reverberating, or is that somehow going to be muffled? Or since you're the engineer, do you have any comments about noise muffling on the actual structure itself?
I will ask the Bruns folks to speak to the actual building construction itself, as this is one of their products that they build pretty consistently.
Okay, that's fair. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but since you put the tag engineer on yourself, I was going to ask you an engineering question.
I will tell you generally, as an engineer, sound typically travels sideways, which is the importance of the landscape buffers and the evergreens and things like that. So, you know, as that sound travels sideways, it's muffled by the natural landscaping.
Right. And I appreciate that. Okay, thank you. I didn't want to push you out of your area of expertise, so. Okay, thank you very much. Oh,
I just wanted to note that the owners are not here tonight, being represented by the engineer and also Bruns, so.
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Ma'am, sir, I think you're up, aren't you the,
You've got to open the floor to public comment.
oh my gosh.
Or do we want to ask questions of
We're,
Can
we're,
we do that?
we're thinking of asking questions to Bruns as the applicant or representing the applicant. And again, if you could state your name and your address.
BJ Ernsthausen, 3050 Tip Cowsville. I'm with Bruns General Contracting.
Do you have any comments about what we've been discussing up to this point?
Yeah, you were talking about the sound. So it's a pre-engineered metal building, but it's fully insulated, roof, walls. Like Eric mentioned, sound should not be an issue. Like I said, it's fully insulated.
Okay. Can you describe the operations then? Is it going to be a loaded truck comes in, other trucks are going to be sitting there waiting for that load to be distributed, and then they leave and so forth and so on? Is that type of activity we're talking about here? Or are we talking about warehousing and storing some of this data, this material? Or
Well, as you can see, the building's not very big, so I wouldn't really call it a warehouse per se, but it's moving freight from trailer to trailer, and just, it's a trailer terminal basically, moving freight.
okay, yeah, that made sense too. When I was looking at the size of the building, and then
Yeah.
when I heard the word warehouse, I kind of perked my ears up a little bit at that. Can you describe the type of materials that you're going to be transporting in and out of here?
I do not know on the material side.
Okay. You know, the only reason I ask that question is if they're cartoned and, you know, pretty easy to move, relatively easy to move, they're gonna be heavy, I'm sure. But, you know, they're stackable and all that, then that'd be one thing. If we're talking about other types of material, chemicals or something along those lines, might be something else that,
I know chemicals aren't gonna be in that building.
so it's gonna be dried manufactured type goods, parts, things along those lines, or other packageable items that would be going through here.
Correct.
Okay, I think that makes sense to me there. Any other questions from the board?
I'll just make a comment. I've been in several of these, I call it transitional type buildings, and I'm familiar with the company because I've used them 3 or 4 times in the buildings, but from what I understand, there's nowhere, I mean, their idea is to get the goods in and out. They don't want to store them, they don't want to keep them, they want it in and out. And when I saw the size of the building, I thought, it's not going to be much warehousing there, I
Yeah,
don't
and
think.
that's a site drawing, that does not show the office that's in the, it would be the northeast corner. There's a 2-story office space going in there, so that's not shown on the drawing, but as far as warehousing goes, I mean, like you said it best, in and out. So the building's not very big, so.
I think the information we were given said the facility would mostly be open 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and that's when the workers would be there and transfers would occur, but trucks could be going in and out at any time of day? Is that accurate?
Correct, yeah. But as far as loading, that's from 8 to 5. They might come in and grab a trailer, drop a trailer, and leave overnight.
And was there any consideration to have 3 loading docks instead of 4 in order to meet the zoning requirements?
No, the answer is no on that one.
Is that for a sort of business growth potential
Correct.
standpoint?
Yep.
As far as the nighttime operation at the facility, can you explain what type of lighting people would expect to see during that nighttime activity?
So the proposed lot is gonna be lit for security. So as far as lighting goes, I mean, the trucks are gonna come in with headlights, but we've got the buffer all the way around except for the west side, which is commercial, so we should be pretty good there.
Thank you.
Will the transfer continue into the evening or overnight, do you think?
You talking about the transfer of trailers, like in the lot? Yes.
In the lot and also the transfer of materials from one trailer to another. I mean, and I'm talking not necessarily for the first year, but the second year and beyond.
That's a possibility down the road, but I know the first couple of years, they're not planning on doing any of that.
Okay. Okay. Were you part of the full planning then of this?
Negative.
Fair enough.
That's why I had Eric get up here first. He was involved from the early on conversations and stuff, so, with the city and stuff, so that's why I brought him up here.
I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, I'd like to dovetail on Ashley's question. So one of the things I'd asked for with the initial plan review was a lighting plan, which I would expect to receive with the next submittal. Our code for commercial industrial sites requires full cutoff fixtures, meaning that the light is shielded and directed to a location on the lot. And I believe that the maximum foot candle at a property line is 0.5. So it will be it will not be super bright at the property lines, if that's helpful to you at all. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Okay, I think we've heard the applicant then, and I think we've heard staff as well. Okay. Well, do I hear a motion to open the floor to public comments?
I move to open the floor for public comment.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Mr. McGinnis,
Yes?
Ms. Hunter,
Yes.
Mr. Madewell,
Yes.
Ms. Caldwell.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, each speaker will have 3 minutes to make their comments. Please don't try to replicate the comments. Direct your comments to us and not to the applicant. The applicant will have a chance to respond to them. as we go on. And once the floor's been closed to public comments, no additional comments can be made. Do we have any public comment in favor, for, or against the application? If so, please go to the podium and state your name and your address.
I'm Melanie Steiger. I'm at 6842, which is that house right there. I'm a little against it. I do like some of the stuff that they've planned. I will start with that. I like how they have the driveway on the opposite side, so I don't have trucks going right by my house. I wouldn't move the washing bay because that would create more noise, I believe. My concern is, you can see my house is right there. Where the bays are is not that far. My kids play in this area. So I guess I kind of have a question on why we can't lose a couple parking spots and push it back a little further. Do you need 80 parking spots all at once? I don't know. You lost probably at least 6 or 5 on each side. You can push the whole building back, which would leave it not as far, not as close to my house, where I work a crazy rotating shift at Procter & Gamble. So I sleep during the day, during the night, depends on the week. That's probably my biggest concern.
Okay, you're not talking about a lot here either. You're talking, because that building is pretty much pretty much behind your house anyway, but moving it back another maybe, I don't know. What's the distance between your house and the garage?
I don't know the exact dimensions, but if you look here, oh, there's a step there. The loading dock is about 50 foot, which is about the front of my barn. So if it was pushed back at least that far, it'd be far enough that the noise and all that would be not as noticeable.
Well, I understand that. I understand. I appreciate what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, that'll be something we made a note. That'll be something certainly to ask the applicant. Do you have any other comments about this, please?
The other thing that was mentioned was 10 trucks for the first year, 20 following after that, but I believe I heard 45, so that is a concern, that more trucks coming in and out throughout the day.
Yeah, I'm obviously not prepared to answer any of that comment myself. But I will say that the area you live in is certainly zoned for that type of expansion.
Right.
It's certainly something to think about. And, you know, I really empathize with what you're saying. I can't say anything one way or another, 'cause I don't honestly know. But it is part of that neighborhood.
Right, and they did send us paperwork to try to buy our house. Roadstar Trucking did. So I know that's also a thing we're not really considering on selling at this moment, especially for what was offered. And that's not something we're considering, so.
Okay, and I do appreciate your situation, honestly, you know, but it's not easy. And I know when things like this happen, you know, everybody's kind of taken by surprise. So I'm glad the 12 feet just came up, so you have at least an opportunity to, you know, let us know what you think. That's a good thing, and I do appreciate your comments. Anything else that you'd like to say?
I think I've covered most of it, unless my husband has something to say.
Yeah, because I know with Casey's across the street, you know, with just different things that are happening all along and through there on Salem Avenue, it's getting busy. And it's certainly something that I know that we need to worry about. I know the city itself is expanding. I mean, I just got a note about a traffic circle going down here they're gonna be tearing up our roads down here for about 2.5 years. And I'm like, well, that's convenient. In the long run, it'll be good. But in the short term, it's going to be really urgent. So, you know, I think that's something that we all have to deal with a little bit and make some thoughtful choices and decisions on. as we go forward. But again, I appreciate that. Sir, do you have any more comments that you'd like to add to your wives? And thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
William Steiger, resident of 6842 Salem Avenue. I don't know if anybody from the board has worked in a warehouse or in the yard of a warehouse, but the difference of 12 feet for all the noise from the trailers and being backed up into the bays is quite considerable. 12 feet is everything when you're living right next to it. So I think 88 feet, you don't see 12 feet being very much, but it's quite a bit when she's trying to sleep and you're gonna have, they're saying 9 to 5, but they just said it's also gonna run into the night. So we got kids sleeping, she's gonna be sleeping at random times. It would be a lot better moved to a little more to the south, noise-wise.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate what you're saying. I really can. This isn't Chicago. You don't live underneath the L, but nevertheless,
Right.
it's there.
And another question I have is about the landscaping that they're putting in and how tall the landscaping is supposed to be when they plant it. Because if they're just putting in a chain link fence and they're putting in tiny trees that are gonna take 20 years to grow, it's gonna do nothing for us. So we need to know how tall the landscaping is going to be. Otherwise, they need to put in a privacy fence.
Okay, that's a fair question too. Again, we're making notes, so I appreciate you talking to us.
That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Stenger. Anybody else like to come up here and make a comment, please?
I am the neighbor at 6832 on Salem Avenue. And Greg Buthker?
Mr. Booker?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Buthker. I'm not against the property or the use. I understand the nature of what you're doing. Our 4 properties are dinosaurs. There's going to be an infill conversion to non-residential. It's happening. Get over it. I get. What I'm concerned about is that that interface between the industrial and the long-term residential. And I've seen this happen time and time again. No, I've seen it once, where the guy comes in and promises everything, and it gets loud. And then who do we go to when it's loud? Do we go to them? Do we go to you? These are things that you guys should think about. The other question is, why don't they, could they have built something a little bit like on 8 acres instead of 6.12? I mean, couldn't they get more acreage? This would work a lot better. This is kind of squeezed in, sandwiched in there pretty close. I think they need more land, or they need less space. And probably the last thing I want to say is in your regs, you dictate, or don't dictate, but you say that loading facilities may not operate between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m. That's II on the last of 121106B. So tell me how this works. I want to know that because these guys are coming from Ontario. He's going to have a major transportation hub down here to take all of the material from Canada in here, and this is their hub. And they're only going to do this for, 8 to 5? Come on. Wasn't born yesterday. I know how that works. What are we going to do about that? How do you keep it quiet? Are you going to require them to have some kind of, are you going to enforce this? Or are we going to come back again and have another BZA meeting to say, okay, this isn't doable? He needs more land. He needs to spread out. I mean, let's just be honest about it. Not against what he's doing. It's coming. Get over it. But as far as the residents go, look out for us. We depend on you to look out for our needs.
Yes,
And
sir.
what about the other question is, what about sound? There is no real regulation about sound, is there? What is it, like how many decibels we could expect at our property? What does it say?
I don't have it right here in front of me, but I remember just down the road from where you are, there was a shooting range or some guy had a gun, gun range, private one going on in his backyard. And there was a lot of discussion about that at that time. I also know that in certain areas, especially if you're talking about, blasting or anything like that, there's a certain decibel range, that people look at. And I think what happens is that when we're talking about sound, we're talking about two types of sound. The sudden sound that people react to, or the background sound that people really get used to in a hurry. You know, like the airplanes playing when they land.
Like
you know.
Salem Avenue.
Or Salem Avenue, living on Salem Avenue, exactly. So, you know, that's the type of thing I think that they look at with sound. Sound's a really difficult one, though, because people individually react to sounds. And that can be really tough. So I appreciate what you're saying.
Well, thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to make a comment, please? Hello.
My name is Lorelei Slumker. I live at 6467 Burkwood Drive. So I'm directly across the street from the retention pond that's in Bayberry Trails. I've lived there 31 years. Currently, that retention pond is considered private to Bayberry Trails. So I'm assuming that their dry pond will flow southward into our retention pond.
I assume the same thing. That's why I asked the question I asked.
Yeah, so we've tried for years to get the city to take it over, the county to take it over, because we've had one instance of a broken tile on Mount Royal, which is where our retention pond flows under the Bayberry Trail subdivision into that retention pond. And we, as a group, had to pay for that. So we had to increase our, right now we pay $65 a year to have it mowed, to have insurance, and I'm just afraid that a tile is gonna get broken and we're gonna have to repair it again. And that was probably 30 years ago, and I think it was $20,000 to repair that. So that's my concern. So I'm not sure if making the parking lot smaller, you would have less runoff. I don't know. So I would respectfully ask that you not allow the variance. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to make a comment? For or against? Mr. Dorman, do we have any comments that were sent in to us via email or letter?
The communications that I received were from individuals that spoke this evening, Ms. Steiger and Mr. Buthker.
Thank you very much. Okay. Do I hear a motion to close public comments?
Can I ask one question?
Sure you can.
To Mr. Dorman. If there is an issue with sound, you know, I've listened to these guys, and like I said, I'm familiar with their buildings, and there is some decent soundproofing, but like the gentleman just said, if there's an issue with sound, it becomes loud or uncontrollable or whatever. What is the recourse for them at that point?
What I don't have an exact answer for you, but I believe that there is a noise ordinance or reference to noise, and I think it's in the public safety code. That's kind of the large green book over there, the codified ordinances. So if it's in the safety code, it's something that they would need to call into the police department, because the police enforce the safety code. If it's found in the zoning code, and I don't recall seeing that in the zoning code, that would be an issue where we would work with the property owners on mitigating the sound, and if they're unwilling or unable to do that, we'd have no recourse but to issue a zoning violation. Again, if it were a zoning matter, but I think it's a public safety issue.
So the point of, there is an action, a recourse that they can go through, so it's not like you're left out in the blue, I guess.
Yeah, I think the most part, any issue that comes up that's addressed in our code, there is due process in terms of how to handle that issue. And the process that we have to take to try to mitigate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just add, the situation that I was referring to a little bit earlier in the meeting was being run through the police department. It didn't have anything to do with zoning. So I think you're right. I don't think we have any specific ordinance per se or anything in the codified zoning rules that talks about noise. Thank you, Mr. Torman.
The comment about pushing the building back was interesting, and seems like it could make things more tolerable for the neighbors, but we would still need a variance for the 12 feet, because the building pushed back is still gonna require the same variance that is on the table tonight, correct?
That's true. I think as you look at the width of the property and you look at the building width, and where it has to be situated due to ingress egress and maneuverability of the trucks, I believe that if you pushed it back, you would still have that variance for the easternmost dock bay. But I will say, beyond that issue, the plan meets the zoning standards of the CMI zoning district. So the question truly is, based on what's before us, is that a variance that you all would support? The idea of pushing the building back is something that the representatives can take to the owner, and the owner can make a decision on whether or not to do that, but would not be required. The location as shown on the plan is acceptable from a zoning code standpoint.
And I guess, yeah, thank you. Does that satisfy your? And I guess I had one more question that dealt with the drainage again, the drain water. That is a big footprint of asphalt, and that's going to be a lot of potential runoff. It'd be interesting to hear what that plan is going to be and whether it's going to be acceptable to be able to push that water into the upper pool that's going to then go down underneath Bayberry Trails and into the lower one. And I say that because water really wants to go where it wants to go, and it could be a problem. I like the woman that spoke before. I lived in that area too, for 40 years instead of 30, but still, it was a long time. And while I haven't seen the drainage ponds full many times, I have seen them full, and it's a maintenance issue to try to get them cleaned out and so forth and so on. Is there anybody that you know of that you can talk that issue through back there? Does Bayberry have an HOA, a formal one? You do? Yes. Okay. So perhaps reaching out to them and trying to work with them a little bit might be a good thing. I don't know. I don't want to give you an action item. I'm not going to do that. But it may be something, or maybe they can talk to who's their council representative, Mr. Lieberman, or somebody like that. To get some discussion going. I don't know. I'm not sure what the recourse would be. I guess that's why I'm fishing a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, it is outside of the variance issue before us tonight, but rest assured the staff is reviewing the plans. We have a hydrology report and engineering plans from the applicant. Our city engineer is reviewing it. Public service director is reviewing it. Public service director has directed the applicant to reach out to the HOA. We have a contact there, and that's something that they're going to have to approve because it is on a privately owned lot. There will have to be an agreement in place to allow that water to be released into that drain. What I can say is that the site will be designed to collect the water in the parking and taken to the detention basin where it will be held for a designed amount of time and slowly released if that's something that the HOA ends up approving.
Okay, and I think that's fair enough. I know we've had enough cases before us here over the years where we've talked about truck washes, you know, and I'm thinking of the truck stop up there and, or the True North, you know, and, you know, some of the materials that gets washed off the trucks itself, you know, is gonna be chemical, you know.
That's
Right now,
fair.
we wash the car, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes off our car, so you get a big old tractor trailer, and it's gonna be the same sort of thing. You know, how's that gonna be percolated? How's that gonna be, you know, and, you know, that, from what I read, for the details, it was, yep, we're gonna push it down here to the end of the lot and shove it over into this retention pond, and I was like, oh, boy. So, you know, I think it's something that we might want to really consider.
Yeah, I mean,
Again, it is not germane to our case tonight.
Right.
But it is part of the discussion.
You don't get all the details, but just to ameliorate your concerns a little bit, that truck wash will be connected to an oil water separator, so some of that gross stuff coming off the truck will be separated out from what ultimately is piped to the detention basin.
That's good.
Yep, and that's a requirement.
Not like I grew up in eastern Ohio, huh? Just got to dump it into the sewer and let it go.
Times have changed as far as that goes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Seth.
Just to clarify something that our co-member was a great point, is our function here is the variances for that 12 feet less distance. So if that building moves anywhere up and back and forth on that slot, we still have to do the variance. That's our function. I mean, the only way they could get away around that is move the loading dock so it is 100 feet away.
They would have to adjust the location of that dock so it's at least 100 feet away, or eliminate that dock so that the setback or the separation issue is no longer a concern.
So I just wanted to clarify what you said about if you move that, slide it back or eliminate 5, we still have to give the variance.
Oh, I just had a quick comment. I have less of an issue with the variance.
The podium?
Please.
We're
recording it. Meeting, so, William Steiger, 6842. I have less of an issue with the variance if it's farther back next to the barn versus right next to my house. It would eliminate the sound pretty dramatically, in my opinion. And that's, I don't have an issue, as much of an issue as that then, so.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
I would just say the floor is still open, so if, when you guys are ready, if you want to close the floor, that would be the appropriate.
If you could please come to the podium, please.
Lorelei Slemker, 6467 Brookwood Drive. Has there been an EPA study done to see what is going to be washed off the trucks that goes through the retention basins?
Not that I know of, although I'm sure that there are some standards that exist out there, and that should be part of the discussion.
Okay.
I mean, you know, because that's typically what, you know, the EPA would know that, or the water people. And again, I'm speaking for somebody, not myself, so. Okay, any other comments? Yes, ma'am.
Melanie Steiger, 6842. So yes, if we move it back, we'll still need a variance for those 12 feet. My thing is, if we approve the variance now, they probably won't ever move it back further. So I think they should submit a separate request to move it back further with it also at the variance again. I think if we approve it now, I don't think it will get moved back. So that's where I stand on that.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, do I have a motion to close the floor to public comments?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Roll call?
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes?
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
And Ms. Codwell?
Yes.
Okay. May I have the engineer, Eric, oh, I can't even read my own writing. Could you please come up here again, please? And restate your name.
Yes, Eric Bruckman, 3966 Eaglestone Drive. Bruckman, B-R-U.
You've heard the comments. Actually, wasn't all that bad. There's a few. Do you have any response or initial thoughts about either moving the building back and addressing the groundwater issue? The other one would be talking about noise.
As it relates to moving the building back, that is something we would have to take back before the client. Obviously, they're the ones that have decided what fits for their operation, and, you know, that's what went into the size and the number of parking spaces, the size of the building, things of that nature. So I can't give a definitive yes or no as to their answer to that question, but it is an option we can take back to them and see how many of those parking spaces they actually want to have now, or see what that expansion looks like.
Okay, that makes sense.
As it relates to the sound, again, I'll restate, you know, not to get too technical with it, but sound does travel out, not up. So that is the benefit, and the reasons that most codes have landscaping buffers on the perimeter of the properties to eliminate that noise is to give that buffer and that one last chance for sound to stay on that property before it eliminates. Not saying it completely takes care of it, but it does create that lateral buffer, which is where sound tends to travel.
One of the statements was made that about sound, and I agree with what you're saying. Tends to diffuse it, but would a privacy fence, in addition to the deciduous or the evergreen type of screening, would that further mitigate that potential issue?
It could. A vinyl privacy fence, like you would typically see at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, is typically hollow on the inside, so it does not provide much lateral sound barrier like a blue spruce or some sort of evergreen or juniper wood, which is the types of plantings that are in line to be planted there. So your main benefit would be your plantings more than any type of privacy fence. The privacy fence would be more of a visual barrier than a sound barrier.
Yeah, and sometimes that visual effect makes a big difference.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. You know, because I'm thinking not only of the actual transfer of the materials within the building itself, but also the backup. You know, when a truck backs up, it's going to be beeping. That's going to be a loud, high-pitched noise, which tends to penetrate through evergreens sharper, if you will, than it may be deflected by a more solid barrier.
Again, a privacy fence, a vinyl type privacy fence is something we can take back to the client and see if that's something they're willing to introduce into the project.
Okay, I appreciate that. And the water, I mentioned it, and by golly, we had somebody talk about it, so.
Right. So I will echo what Seth said. You know, we submitted a full hydraulic report, drainage report, that was reviewed by the city's engineer, and to this point has more or less been approved, pending reaching out to the homeowners association of the southern border. So to me, that would indicate that we've met all the requirements that the city has in their code for stormwater drainage for this parcel.
Okay, and that reach out would be not your responsibility, I assume, but the city's, correct?
I think it'll be a mutual, both of us working with the city, or with the homeowners association to facilitate that connection.
And I think one of Eric's coworkers, Jamie Blair, with E.L. Robinson, is planning to reach out to the HOA.
Thank you, Seth.
A quick question, you did the landscaping planning too, as well?
My company did.
Okay. Just to address one question, and I've been involved in this, I think I know the answer, but maybe not. The size of the plants that you put in the trees, they're not one-year growth trees, I would assume, or it's 6 months.
I mean, we all know what a blue spruce is. We all know what a juniper is. Junipers probably grow a little faster than blue spruces, but, you know, in 15 years' time, a blue spruce gets to be 20, 25 feet, 30 feet.
The point where you plant them, any idea?
Probably on average 8 feet.
That's
6 to
not
8
1
feet.
foot, you know.
Right.
Okay, we're talking about operation from 8 to 5. Typically, that's truck traffic. Are there going to be staff in there after 5 o'clock at night to be doing any moving?
From what I understand, eventually there will be staff working overnight. From what I understand, it will not be loading and unloading, transferring within the facility, but it may be dropping a truck, bringing a truck in, dropping it, and pulling out, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I want to get a feel for the type of traffic that we're talking about here, too. Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bruckner.
Yep.
If I might clarify on the landscape plan, I believe you have all 3 pages. Blue spruce are showing as planting size of 6 feet, and the juniper planting size of 5 feet. So that'll be day 1.
Thank you, I didn't see that.
And Mr. Dorman, the plans we received, I think, did mention a privacy fence. Can you remind me which side of the property has a privacy fence?
So the initial plan showed a chain link on the southern property line. That would be the adjacent line with Bayberry Trail. Staff requested, due to the fact that the detention basin is closer to the rear property line and they were not showing any blue spruce, I requested an 8-foot tall privacy fence on that side, on the south side.
Thank you, Mr. Dorman. Any other discussion here among the board?
I've been of 2 minds about this all night. It seems silly to come back again or I guess if we don't approve the variance now, they can't come back again, even if they submit a new plan with the building back 50 feet. But we could pass this variance tonight with the condition that they move the building back 50 feet, right? And then he takes it back to the owner decides yes or no, and we go from there. And if the owner says no, then they would have to come back again with a different plan.
I guess if you guys are, as a board collectively, are thinking about alternatives, I would recommend potentially tabling the application to allow the applicant time to go back to the owner and present the findings and the testimony and see what they're willing to do before you make a decision on the variance.
What do you think? That is an option, and I know, this isn't a first time we've ever done that. We've had applications in the past where we've come to a particular area and said, you know, what are we gonna do about this? The applicant has to go back, they have to do something, they have to, you know, do more homework or paperwork or whatever, and then we meet again. It can be at our next regularly scheduled meeting.
That's right.
Or it can be a special meeting, depending on the urgency of what we're talking about here. But I would leave that up to Mr. Dorman to coordinate. But, you know, we have had that situation happen in the past, not with you guys, but we have had it. So, you know, I think that's not a bad idea personally.
I think we've heard the comments from surrounding property owners. It seems like it's a big project, a good project, a project that's gonna happen. And this is our chance to make sure it happens in the best way possible. And it also seems from some of the things that I've heard tonight that there's a look to the future towards expansion, I've been wondering, you know, we heard that you tried to acquire the property, or somebody tried to acquire the property to the south. Who knows what's going on with the property to the north? But long-term, there might be more land available for this company that they could get back some of those trailer parking spots that they would lose by moving the building 50 feet. So I like the idea of tabling it, taking those suggestions, and seeing if we can get a plan at the next meeting that we could approve the variance and it still be keeping the concerns of the neighbors in mind.
And dovetailing to that, that would give us a chance to, you know, reach out to the HOA and get an agreement, you know, find out what's going on there, find out whether that can be, you know, supported when it comes to the groundwater. You know, again, I always get nervous when I'm thinking about groundwater just being shoved over a property line. And, you know, a 1 week, you know, is pretty short time to try to get all that coordinated and laid out properly, I think, too.
Yeah, there again, that's a discussion that will occur outside of this body's action on the variance. So I don't know that we need to tie sort of your action to the stormwater. So
I agree, but it's something that I want to make sure we don't lose sight of it.
it won't be. That's something that staff is on top of and reviewing as part of our internal review. So,
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
welcome.
Well, we've had some advice from Mr. Dorman. What, do I hear a motion?
One more comment, I'm sorry, but I want to make it clear in my mind that if we table this, the only thing we have to address is the variance, not the groundwater, even though it's important.
Correct.
Not the sound, even though it's important.
Correct.
But our goal is just to vote or elect to approve or disapprove the variance. So I just want to make.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think part of the discussion that we had tonight was to open up and build that dialogue and allow the neighbors and some of the folks here to be able to express their concerns. And again, if that goes into the planning, at least those thoughts can be sent back to the owners so that they can look at that into their planning. And you know, with coordination with the city, maybe we can come up with a amiable solution to a lot of this stuff. And you're right, the only thing we're worried about is the 12 feet.
So if we table, the only goal is to be able to see if the owners will relent and move back or not. And that's the only impact we will have, right?
Yeah, with respect to the other issues that are outside of the scope of the variance, those are something that I will take to the owner and let them make a decision on. It's not something that they'd be obligated to do from a planning and zoning code standpoint. Those items would not be required.
Yeah, by any ways, I'm not diminishing the importance of that. I think it's important, but I just got to focus on what we have to do.
I agree, and I will take those issues to the owner as well. As I'm sure Bruns and the engineer will.
Well, I think that giving them, you know, some time to go through and at least bring that information back to the owners and see if there's any recourse is a good thing. Depending on how it comes back, isn't going to change my mind any. You know, and again, we're looking at the variance as it's written. So,
Right.
you know, that's all we're looking at. And we certainly went outside of that framework a little bit tonight. But I think it was good to be able to talk about that. and to get it out in the open, and talk about, what actions are being taken to try to mitigate some of these concerns that people have, so, and I think there's a good understanding of the way the future is anyway, too, and that's important as well, because everybody in this room has got their own stake in the pie here, and it's important, so.
Absolutely.
I think we're good there. Thank you again, Mr. Dorman. Appreciate the clarifications. Any other questions, comments on the board? Well, we beat around the potential of tabling this. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to table the vote on the application to allow time for the concerns to be brought to the owner.
I will second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Ms. Hunter?
Yes.
Mr. Madewell?
Yes.
And Ms. Caldwell?
Yes.
Then we'll table this until our next regularly scheduled meeting, or,
So there are two options. It would be the next regularly scheduled meeting. We could call a special meeting if the board members are available. We would need to make sure that we allow enough time for the public notices to occur, which roughly is about 2 weeks that we would need for that. So we could do it slightly quicker.
well, we'll let you, in your discretion, figure out which is best then.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's been moved and seconded. We're going to be tabling this meeting until our next regularly scheduled meeting or earlier, depending on how things work out. I don't think we have any other business for tonight, so if so, do I hear a motion?
Move to adjourn?
I'll second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you all for your